No problem.
Sorry, ladies. And you are live.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining Amnesty International South Africa in collaboration with Constitution Hill, our final youth webinar that is around the myth-busting series. My name is Rejoice Mageta. I'm the activism coordinator organizing at Amnesty International South Africa, and it is a pleasure to have you join us today. The reason why we started this myth-busting series is because we found that a lot of people in South Africa particularly believe in certain quote unquote truths that aren't necessarily truths. So that's why we went on this journey of debunking several myths around gender-based violence. Now, another reason why this is important is that the murder rate of females in South Africa is almost 5 times the global average. That's why we thought that, you know what, let's continue with this work that we're doing in terms of debunking myths and making sure that we're raising awareness on gender-based violence and the implications that it's having on the country. So with the Interrupt GBV campaign, our main objectives really are to really advocate for behavioral change and ensure that we're raising awareness to a point where nobody is silent around gender-based violence. So thank you so much for joining. Like I said, my name is Rejoice Mageta, and in this conversation today, we're hoping to have just a natural conversation with our youth activists. On the panel today, we have Alwande Khumalo, who is 23 years old. She's a 2-time graduate from WITS. She holds a political studies honors degree, and her research focused around a select anti-human trafficking, specializing in police task force gender dynamics and organizational structures. She has interests in state preservation and advocacy of human rights, gender studies, police, and particularly around ethical policing throughout the global South. She's also interested in the Black Lives Matter movement, feminism, radical and cultural dynamics, mental health, and youth inclusive advocacy. So Alwande will be joining us. She also is a part of Amnesty International South Africa's Youth Power Action Network. On the panel again, we also have Phumelela Qaqela, who is a full-time activist and a secretary at Amnesty International Nelson Mandela's University chapter. We're very pleased to have you join us, ladies. And, with that, I'm hoping that we can have, like I said, in as much as these kinds of conversations are somewhat formal, we want to have a real conversation where we can all share and basically, hopefully at the end of this, facilitate some kind of healing and inspire somebody to stop the silence around gender-based violence. So today, like I said, we are closing the series on the Mythbuster, youth conversations that we've been having with our youths over the last couple of weeks. The first conversation that we had under the myth-busting series was around passions and lusts, and whether men cannot control their passions and lusts. And from that conversation, we really saw that men can actually control their passions and lusts. It's not about them not being able to control them. It's about a person actually making the decision to control their passions. And the second conversation we had, which was facilitated by one of our youth activists, Nomandla Vilagazi from UCT. In that conversation, we debunked the myth around whether a woman is asking for it because of what she's wearing. A lot of what we are experiencing, or a lot of the reports that we're seeing, are that a lot of women, because of what they're wearing, they think that I was a target because of what I was wearing. But in that conversation, we found that if a person is going to rape, they are going to rape. It doesn't matter what you're wearing, because we've seen that old people, grandmothers, children are getting raped regardless of what they're wearing. So it isn't about you. So if you're somebody that has experienced that, please don't blame yourself for what you were wearing. So in this third conversation, we're going to be looking at the myth that says that a lot of victims lie about being raped or harassed and give false reports for revenge. So obviously this, is untrue, but it would be great to hear our panelists' opening statements on these before we actually go into sharing that fact. So I'm going to hand it over to you, Alwande, to basically unpack why you believe a lot of victims lie about being harassed or raped and give false reports, and if you think that is true. So Alwande, over to you.
Yeah, thanks so much, Joyce, and thank you so much for having us. And yeah, I'm excited to have this unnecessary conversation. So yeah, I'm going to be as authentic and as controlled as possible. So please just bear with me if there's like random outbursts here and there. But yeah, I can't stress enough just like how false this notion is of a lot of victims lie about being raped or harassed and give false reports for revenge. It's just simply not true. So how I understand it is that, and as you shared with us, Joyce, when we say a lot obviously means more than 2%, right? Well, statistically speaking, only 2% of rape allegations in South Africa are false. So already from a statistical point of view, that's just not true. And yes, obviously, you need to break up stats and, you can't just look at a stats by itself. But yeah, they still hold quite a bit of truth in that. And I think we also, as a society, even as a world, we underestimate how psychologically, emotionally, mentally, and even physically tiresome it is to have to recount a GBV incident again and again and again, or even just twice, Personally, and I'm going to speak a lot from a personal basis, not a single one of my friends, my loved ones, my family members have not been subjected to GBV, from catcalling to various forms of objectification, or to, like rape or other forms of sexual assault. And so clearly it's sadly not a unique lived experience. And for that point alone, you can obviously logically see that GBV clearly happens on a mammoth scale in South Africa. And yeah, I think the last point I'd like to add before we move on, and I'll quickly add this, is that, I mean, it shouldn't happen to one person. GBV, like one injustice is injustice enough. It shouldn't happen to one person. However, with saying that, our sad reality is that GBV has a pattern that a lot of perpetrators reoffend, and obviously they reoffend to victims and or survivors. So, I mean, we can name numerous reoffending perpetrators from being the premise of not in my name, the words "are you" referenceless, total shutdown, Ukwezi, who alleged that her perpetrator raped her more than once, actually, not just once. The Chanel Miller and Brock Turner case, Me Too, Jeffrey Epstein, and just like other wars and movements that are like moving around in those wars on women. So yeah, it clearly isn't something that just happens and or doesn't happen on a large scale. And thus, if it is happening again and again and again, I think the logical thing is to assume that, okay, no, you know what, you are innocent before proven guilty, not just for perpetrators, but for victims as well. Yeah.
Thank you so much for that, Alwanda. And it's so interesting that you say all of your friends, have experienced some kind of sexual harassment. Very, very interesting. And it is scary as well, because this is the country that we live in, Phumelela, can we hear from you what your thoughts are on whether this is true or not, and adding to what Alwanda has just shared with us?
Okay, thank you so much, Rejoice. Hello, everyone. My thing is, if we're looking at something as menial as 2%, then I think we, as not just a country, but the whole world, have bigger problems if that's what we're focusing on. Because if we're going to place all our energy and all our time on the 2%, then we're invalidating all the struggles that all these other women have actually gone through. Do you understand what I mean? So as much as that 2% is there, and we shouldn't completely ignore it, but I feel like conversations like this take away from the real issues. We've got huge problems as a country. If our stats are 5 times the global statistics, then clearly we've got a problem. Do you understand what I mean? We cannot be focusing on that 2%. If we're going to stop and look at victims lie about being raped, firstly, they're no longer victims if they're lying. Let's just start there. And as Alwanda has already pointed out, a lot means a majority. So even that in itself is problematic. So we're not taking away from the fact that in rare cases, it does falsely accused of raping that, and we're not invalidating their struggles as individuals. However, we cannot be having that conversation in the midst of a gender-based violence pandemic in this country. Our main focus, not only as women, but as a nation, the government, young men, young women should be focusing on is the preventative measures, and not just, oh yes, but sometimes people get falsely accused. So now how are we going to differentiate? Are we just going to go on the innocent until proven guilty? Then we're going to look at stats in terms of the justice system. How often do people actually get convicted for these gender-based violent crimes? Because it's so hard to prove it. It doesn't even start there. But it's going to happen. We're going to discuss it further in the conversation of, it even starts at the police station when you're reporting your rape or your incident, where you're not even taken seriously because, oh yes, but he's your uncle, it's a family matter, and you young girls lie about it. So it's not taken seriously from that point of view. So I don't even think we should be giving it much platform, because as Alwanda has already stated, it's a very unnecessary conversation. And yeah, our main focus is the pandemic of gender-based violence and the femicide that is happening in South Africa.
Yeah, no, thank you for that, Phumelela. And I think you make some very valid points, and particularly around how, we shouldn't even be having this conversation if it's just 2%. But unfortunately, we live in a country where people believe that, some people actually lie about it. Like you just gave an example about families and, the community structures that we find ourselves in, where it's basically, believed that no, she was lying, or people do not want to believe the victim for whatever reasons, and I wanted to kind of get your thoughts on, why do you think that is? Why do you think that our communities prefer to not believe the victim until something happens, or until
It's usually one of two things. Okay. Firstly, in a lot of cases, the man is usually a breadwinner in the family, and they don't want to offend him. They don't want him to be seen in a different light. And usually he's a community man as well. He's a leader at the church, all those things. So it's a matter of his reputation being tarnished as well. And also in the case of step parents as well, you as the woman, some women just cannot even fathom the idea of this man that I married is capable of something like that. And they usually brush it off as, this child just won't accept the current situation. Oh no, she's just acting out. Oh no, it's just teenagers being teenagers, or stuff like that. And it's a huge problem, because in a lot of instances, sometimes pregnancies come out of stuff like this, and it always usually amounts to, we'll just have the conversation as a family. It usually just ends as a family meeting, and this child is broken, and this child is continuously raped, because as soon as you speak out and he knows you've spoken out and he realizes that nothing is going to be done about it, these perpetrators carry on. They carry on like raping you, harassing you, and just taking advantage of you as a whole, because now they see that there's nothing that can be done. No one's here to protect you. And they don't even mind saying stuff like that out loud. And you're like, what are you going to do? What are you going to do about it? So it's stuff like that where the families just feel like, no, I don't want stuff like this coming out.
Thank you. You make some very important points there. Alwande, what is your take on the role of the family and the community? Because if this is the case, a lot of our children are not safe. A lot of our young sisters and even, young brothers, boys, they're not safe, because obviously rape happens to anyone, any sex or any gender. Alwande, can we hear from you on if you want to add anything to what Phumelela has said around the role of the family in the community?
Sure, no, you really hit the nail on the coffin there. I think first and foremost, even when you were asking her about this, I was thinking about an answer. And the first thing I actually thought about was just this idea of protecting your family image and how important that is, because whatever reason, I mean, if we can take it from the community that I belong to, the Black community, like we're under constant attack day in, day out. So a lot of the things that we do is kept in home, because it's just a war we don't necessarily want to fight, and a reality we don't necessarily want to have to face. And tying into that, another point is that also ignorance is bliss. Like if you don't know of a situation, you have opportunities and the capacity to ignore it and act like it doesn't actually happen. And then, just like the role of tradition. And when I say tradition, I don't just mean like culture. I mean tradition, like how things are done maybe in your household, or how things are done in your family dynamics, how things are done even with your friends, your family, whatever, just how things are done for you. I think tradition has such a hold on us, and we don't necessarily we don't welcome change, whether it's positive change or negative change, and situations where you have to have uncomfortable conversations, and not just conversations, but conversations that lead to adequate and proportional responses, whether it's persecution or whatever. we just don't want to have those conversations. So we aren't willing to, you know, deal with the realities that we are. And another point that I didn't even think about is that most, I mean, and this has a lot of historical backing, but most men are breadwinners in our families. And it's very easy to just walk out on your family and, you know, for your whole family structure to change. So yeah, that's just, it was largely an echo of what was said.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think we can't really talk about South African families without, you know, acknowledging the role that men play in our families, and it's real. You know, we can't really avoid it. You know, for those of us that have fathers, they are there, and they likely what do you call them, like providers in the family, right? And those that aren't there, there's some kind of father figure, but they also kind of play a provisional role, right? And I want to go back a bit, since we are having this conversation, and it is part of this event that we're having with Conhill, right? So linking it back to Human Rights Day and Human Rights Month, basically, right? We do know what happened in Sharpeville, right? Where yeah, it was a massacre basically, and people were slaughtered. And the history of this country, you know, we come from a history of a lot of violence, which, you know, for one, I'm not really sure that we've completely healed from. People can say we haven't. At the time, I would say that it was our parents that were experiencing this, but because our parents experienced that kind of trauma, it directly, you know, translates to us, because we are raised by these people that quote unquote, we can say that they have not really healed from that trauma. So naturally, you know, we have inherited some of those behaviors or toxic, those kind of traumas that we've seen. So I want to go back to the Human Rights Month, right? How, you know, in the context of Human Rights Month, why do you think it's important to believe victims or survivors, you know? And I just want to link it to like the power structures and what we're seeing, and particularly linking it to what you were saying around traditions. And what we're seeing in our communities around the power structures, you know, the fact that, you know, as the Black community, we had no power, you know, and for whatever reason, some could even argue that we internalized that, right? So that's why seeing that in our family structures today, the men that we have in our families, it's not always men, but majority of the case it's men, they want to show their power, you know, by being violent towards us. So in your own opinion, and I'll give it to you, Alwande, why is it important to believe victims and survivors?
Yeah, I mean, we have public holidays because they're like days of remembrance, you know, you remember something big that happened, and it will usually transition into some sort of good. You know, there are your very few public holidays that are a little bit dodgy, like, what's a dodgy public, like Columbus Day, but anyways, that's a different thing. So it is a day of remembrance, right? And yeah, obviously Human Rights Day is to remember the role that the Sharpeville massacre actually played in attaining democracy, and obviously that transition from an apartheid-led government to our current constitutional democracy. And another point is that South Africa has a fantastic constitution. We have one of like the best constitutions in the world. It's a very human rights centric constitution, you know, it says a lot of the right things in a lot of the right ways, you know, it sort of has like, it's a constitution of a state you would want to live in if we followed that constitution. However, on the other hand, SA is also notorious for not implementing the laws and the sentiments. I don't even want to say sentiments because it's mostly legislation that's in our constitution. And I mean, a few of those are like the right to equality, human dignity, and life. And obviously, whenever you go through something of GBV, all of these rights are infringed upon and are affected. So I think a big thing that we have, and I mean, I don't have any form of legal backing, but I mean, I think anyone would understand that the way the rule of law works is that you're innocent until proven guilty, just to sum it up in like one phrase. However, a lot of the time you hear this phrase sort of being used to safeguard perpetrators. and be like, oh no, that person's lying. You see, a good instance would be like the Twitter rape lists that constantly get produced, and that a lot of those lists are actually pretty similar. You know, those names come up again and again and again and again and again. And you're like, what's happening over here? Because we are following the legislation of your fantastic constitution by reporting things when we do report them, or speaking up to the authority figures that we need to speak up to. We are, you know, doing everything and going above and beyond to sort this out and make this sort of investigation as easy as possible, but that isn't coming to fruition. So when you think of stuff like that, you think where another arm of this, sorry, I should have started with this point, but I also think the patriarchy has such a huge hold in society, and they are the top in every single form, in every single sphere of society. And one of those would be in the judiciary and legislation. The patriarchy is over there, and this innocence until proven guilty is actually, realistically speaking, has only been used to safeguard perpetrators of GBV and a lot of enablers of the patriarchy and beneficiaries from that. So I'm just really, really fascinated on how we all understand the sentiment of innocence until proven guilty, until it harms people of the patriarchy or people who are in power, including GBV perpetrators. People hardly say that to victims of GBV and or survivors of GBV. They'll never be like, oh no, you know what, let's actually dig into this and do a thorough and fair investigation and follow what our constitution says, because this person is telling the truth, i.e. innocence until proven guilty. That just doesn't happen, you know? So yeah, there's a lot of systemic changes that need to take place. I don't even know if I answered your question. I'm really sorry if I didn't.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Yes.
Okay, sorry. You were frozen for a second there, but I hear you completely, Alwande, and I think this leads perfectly into our next question, particularly around the justice system and whether it is doing enough. And before we go to that, and we'll hand it over to you, Phumelela, I just want to say to the people that are watching us, whether you are joining via Zoom or on Facebook, please just feel free to share your questions, comments in the chat. And if you have any questions for any of our panelists, please just type them in the chat, and we will have a session in the next few minutes where we will be answering your questions. But just basically adding to what you were saying, Alwande, around the role of the justice system. And I love that you put it in such a way that it gives us a vision, right? An idea of how our government is actually structured, right? And the patriarchy that exists in positions of power, right? And that is at a legislative level, right? That is at a government level where all of these laws, these beautiful, pieces of legislation are put together, right? But at a community level, and going to what I'll say, I think somebody actually in the first webinar that we had on the 21st said that, and this is a conversation that we've had that is a bit controversial, but I do want to add it there, that yes, we have fathers, we have people in our communities that are available, and but a lot of them maybe are at work, right? So they're not immediately in the family, not as regularly as we would imagine, right? So a lot of these young men, young boys that perpetrators of GBV are raised by women. So that is going to be my next question, to look at the role, what you think, if this is even a thing, around the role of women and what we can do, not to blame any victims, because I know the feminist movement will be like, yay, you are cancelled. So not to any of that. We just want to have a real conversation looking at all angles, right? Let's have a holistic conversation and look at everybody that is in the picture, the role that we play. So before going into that, I just want to go back to what you were saying, Alwande, around the justice system. Phumelela, do you think that our justice system is doing let's just leave it at that, survivors and victims of of GBV. Yeah, let's hear from you, Pumela.
You see, the problem that I have, and not just me, but a lot of, I don't like the word victims, but a lot of survivors, because honestly speaking, to be alive after an ordeal of gender-based violence is a big deal that we're starting to take for granted in this country, because women are getting killed by the hour. We just need to start there. So the justice system is failing survivors. Firstly, if I'm going to get up today and say the man who lives 2 houses from my house has raped me at the police station, the man who's handling my case is not psychologically trained to deal with me coming with such a emotionally heavy crime, right? So it starts there. And secondly, after I've opened my case, a rape kit is done, and this is best case scenario. Best case scenario. If I've opened my case, a rape kit is done, and all of that. After all of that is done, I'm going back to that same house where that same man still lives 2 houses away from me. And I think a lot of people take that for granted. The same person who violated me is still still within reach. Do you understand what I mean? So even after he's been arrested, he's going to be released on bail, and he's going to come back to the same street in which this all happened. So my problem starts there with the fact that I'm not protected by the justice system on a more immediate basis, right? Then we go as far as now going to court, now have to relive this whole thing. And unfortunately, because of that 2%, of women who falsely accuse men, it is so difficult to prove rape in this country. Because if there was no violence involved, and this man, and I only gathered enough strength to report the case a week later, what are the chances of him even being arrested? Do you know what I mean? Because without a rape kit, in essence, there is no rape case, you know? So my issues start there. And I just feel like the government needs to realize that rape in particular, or gender-based violence as a whole, should not be equated to a theft or any other crime. So you can't have the same police officer who's taking statements for, oh, my phone got stolen while I went to the bathroom, be coming and dealing with me who's just been violated like an hour ago. How do they receive me? And why am I reporting my case in a police station when there's a whole bunch of other people here trying to do their own things, you know? So for me, it starts with the reporting of the case, those processes, and just the lack of emotional support that comes from the justice system, because to them, it's just another crime, you know? And with it just being another crime, it's not even taken seriously. My issue is, and this actually breaks me up so much, my issue is the man who killed Uyinene still having to go through a bail hearing and a trial and all of these things, as if there's a chance of him not having done this. Like, why are perpetrators afforded such luxuries? Why does he have the privilege of traumatizing people by going through court, people reliving situations that they don't need to go through? And to be quite honest, the justice system is not on the side of the survivors, but on the side of the perpetrators. So you go in reporting any case for gender-based violence with the entire justice system against you. The same justice system that is supposed to be protecting you is against you from the word go. And the onus is on you as the survivor to try and prove, yet you're going through so much. And this man is just chilling, or this woman is just chilling, like, yeah, give it your best shot. And we cannot take away from the fact that in this country, when it comes to the court of law, it's about who has the best lawyer, and who has the best lawyer also comes with who has the most money. So if I'm going to be violated by a millionaire, what are the chances? what are the chances? This could be on camera, clean, anyone can see it. But if a person has enough money to pay the right lawyers, best believe they going free. So not only is it about not being emotionally supported by the justice system, but also about who has the most money, who has the best lawyer. And it's just the whole system. There needs to be a systematic breakdown and just a tearing of this entire constitution that is supposed to protect all those who live in it. And there was a quote by Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who she always said that the people who drafted the Constitution always forgot about the woman. And it's very evident, because when they say all men, all the man, we're never included. It belongs all to all. The South Africa belongs to all those who live in it. I don't feel safe in this country. Do I belong in this country? Do I belong in this country? And by me going through all of this, it invalidates the whole thing. And that's why a lot of women just choose to deal with their own emotions and not even report cases, because that is a trauma in itself, So no, the justice system has failed us, and it's completely against the victims or perpetrators, victims or survivors, but definitely in favor of the perpetrators from the word go.
Yeah, hey, and I'm just going back to the point that you made against the man who killed Uyinen. It's unfortunate that this is the way that our justice system is structured. You still have to go all through the legal processes. So you are guilty, and as a society, obviously we feel like, no, they don't deserve even, to go through the process of even applying for bail, or whether you would be eligible for bail. But unfortunately, that's the system that we're in, And I wanted to go back to you, Alwande. You mentioned earlier different rights that are, that play a part in terms of gender-based violence and how they violate it. And I wanted to find out, just in all honesty, do you feel like, especially at SAPS, if we started at the police service where you are going to report, let's say, for example, a rape or some kind of violation, do you feel like our police service actually takes human rights into consideration when they're dealing with victims or survivors of GBV? If you have any examples that you can share, please do. But just to get a sense of, what you think. Do you think that they put human rights at the core of their business in terms of dealing with victims and people that come in to report such crimes?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, for sure. I recognize your question. Not yeah, for sure. SAPS is victim orientated, but no, I don't think they are. I think SAPS needs a really large revamping, the whole thing, because even if we look at how SAPS came into being in 1994, or from even 1980s onwards, when there were talks about when Codesa took place and whatever, and there were talks to start this constitutional democracy. SAPS was sort of like, okay, well, a lot of the police officers were about dead appointed police officers, so and we need a police force. We need a police force to be a state. So let's just quickly put anyone left, right, and center in there, and then we can go. When in essence, the police is a really, really important bureaucratic body. They hold so much power. They hold so much power to enforce and to establish order in a society. However, they also have the power and the opportunity to abuse their power. So so SAPS for me personally is a mess. I mean, whenever I am caught in a situation where I would need to, the first thing is to report it at SAPS. And this is something my mom always tells me: you don't go to SAPS first. You call me, and then you call a lawyer, and then you call your sister, and then you call SAPS last, because it's not where and how it should be at this moment. So no, I don't think SAPS is very victim orientated. And I think we can even push this back to say security in SA is also just a mess. For instance, I'm going to refer to Vita Security, and I'm going to say allegedly, but I'm also going to use names because it's a very well-known story. So, I mean, it is what it is. Allegedly, Umcebo Dlamini, there was a lot of GBV allegations that were against him throughout his whole reign. And there was this conversation to say, how should our leaders be? How should our leaders look like? And what should happen? And a friend of mine actually had a case where she wanted to put it against friends of Umcebo Dlamini, not necessarily him. And so the first thing that we did is we recorded everything, firstly just for us, and then we went to campus control. That was the first, because she also stated race. The thing that campus control told us was, you guys are trying to tarnish this man's political career. That was the first thing. Now just think of, and I mean, I don't want to take away from what campus control does and, you know, and the role that they play in society, but they also do not have that much power. Now, if a security force on that level is going to do that, what SAP's going to do at their level when they have that much more power to abuse? And they can just classify it as, oh, I was just following orders. We look at the protests that happen currently, where SAPs came in guns blazing, and they always respond in the same way. And the argument is, we're just following orders. And then their ministers just like, oh no, everyone went crazy. We don't necessarily what happened. You know, there's no sort of accountability. It's, oh, this happens all the time. Just do this. And it's not people orientated. There's no values of Ubuntu, you know, just of who we are, of the collective society. And it happened a lot, even during Feasness Fall, where we would protest, we would put our lives at risk, even more as women, while we were protesting under Feasness Fall. Lunchtime came, all of the male leaders said, okay, go get us lunch, to the women leaders. And you sit and you're like, this is what we're saying when we say GBV. You see, this is what we're talking about. We can't protest from 5 till 12 together, break for an hour for lunch, and then we're equals from 5 to 12. And then in that hour, we're less than you, or we're there to serve you. So no, I don't think at all. Not even SAPS, the whole entire criminal justice system is victim orientated, is a mirror of our constitution, is a mirror of just doing the right thing. Yeah.
Yeah, you know, you raise a very important point there, Alwande, around, you know, these movements that we're a part of. And, you know, just adding on to what you said, I completely agree. I'm not, you know, like you said, it's like allegations, and yeah, it's just stories that, you know, you will hear until they're proven actually guilty, right? But even in my experience, and I'll come to you, Pumelela, I've been in situations where, you know, back when I was still like doing my undergrad, joining these political, what do you call it, societies on campus. And you find the bureaucracy there, you know, and the patriarchy. If you are a woman and you want to stand up for something, it's an issue. And I want to ask you, Pumelela, because I mean, I've had other engagements, you know, in different structures where I've kind of seen this, but in your experience, first of all, do you think that this is reflective of the state of our government, right? I'm not sure if you're involved in politics on any kind of level, and we're not making this a political conversation. It's just adding on to what Alwande was saying around the experiences that women have in these different platforms that we find ourselves on, even in Zabalazo kind of vibe with These Must Fall. You know, some women are still subjected to these kind of things. I wanted to find out, Pumelela, do you think that this is reflective of the whole system? And what do you think it will take to get that to change, where we are all seen as equals, and when a woman says something against somebody that is a leader, it's not seen as an attack on their political career, but actually the victim voicing, you know, their struggles within that particular movement. Pumelela, just to hear from you on that.
Firstly, I'll tell you this. In most cases, this is a very generalized statement, but in a lot of cases, the only women leaders that are even taken seriously in political spaces are those who assimilate a lot to masculine behaviors. We'll start there.
Yeah.
So if you're going to be a girl with your makeup, face bead, a weave, and in heels, already you don't make the cut. And I mean, this is not trying to offend any woman in any political structure, but in a lot of cases, they find that when they want to be in those rooms where decisions are made, firstly, they only get there by quota in most cases, because these men sit and look around and they're like, Ish, this is going to be problematic. We need numbers. That's the conversation. We need numbers. And just notice, it's not a matter of we need Alwande, we need Rejoice and their thoughts, but just a female figure because of numbers, because of how it's going to look. Even when panels are being planned, like in terms of functions, it's, oh no, this panel has too many males. Let's chip in a female here and there, you know? It's all about quota. It's all about how it's going to look. Yet, I don't think it's just a representation of how our state politics look. It's a representation of the society in South Africa as a whole. The boy child feeling like he's superior to the girl child from the ages of 7, 8. You know, it starts there, where the boy doesn't have to come home earlier than the girl, because they grow up being told that, no, you're female, so this is what you need to do. You're a man, so this is what you need to do. So they take those teachings and they bring them into these spaces, and it's not their fault, don't get me wrong. They take these teachings and all these things, because it's behavior that they grew up with, bring them into these spaces, and the assumption of catering in terms of any march, the duty is always, no, Comrade Alwande will take care of it, and only because Comrade Alwande is female. So she'll definitely handle catering, but the funding for catering is always being handled by the man. So it's a lot of instances where we all partners in crime, and we all comrades, and let's go, until you find those little glimpses of patriarchy, and it's become such an acceptable norm in our society and in our culture that the president must be a man. Oh no, we can't take her seriously. Oh no, but she's dating this person. But no one ever cares who the guy's with, and who he's associated with. And when a woman finally makes it to power, in a rare instance, it's going to be a matter of, oh no, but she slept with this comrade, so obviously she's here. And no one asked who that guy slept with before he got to be in this position. And it's very traumatic, honestly. And it's actually quite a trigger for me, where a lot of political figures are violating people on a daily basis. And when people try to stand up, the first thing is, no, there's an agenda against this person. Because remember, there's a conference coming up next year in March, so they want to tarnish his name. Nonsense. Now it's all about him. And she's completely invalidated, and everything she went through and everything she's going through is completely thrown out, because no, but he's in leadership, so obviously they're going to target him. We were expecting this. We were expecting this kind of accusations. It honestly, I don't want to say it annoys me, because that's an understatement. It angers me. The kind of discrimination and the kind of oppression that women experience within movements. And that's the kind of conversation that is never discussed. The rapes that happened when women were in exile during the apartheid era, no one wants to talk about that. No one wants to talk about what the female comrades went through, because our men went and they got training and came back to fight, so things like that. You just realize how the woman has always been invalidated, and they've always looked at her struggle as, no, but you're a woman, you can take it. It's all for the greater cause. And we're just raising a broken society of women, man.
Yeah, very, very powerful. and very sad, actually, because it's so many years after we've gotten this democracy, and our young leaders, our young female leaders, are still facing this. And before I go into, the next chat, the next session, and I'm also being mindful of time, I do want to say that a comment came in from Facebook from Janine, who said that victim blaming is an atrocity that is shameful in our cultures and communities, which is very true. A lot of us would rather, believe the perpetrator and say, no, it didn't happen until, it actually is proven that, that particular thing or incident happened. Another thing that I do want to add is that we do have a pledge. Amnesty South Africa has a pledge on our website. So please follow us on Amnesty S Africa on all social media platforms to take the pledge to stand against gender-based violence. The pledge really is just you taking a stand and saying that you will no longer be silent around gender-based violence, and you will be that agent of change in your community, right? So going back, and I'm hoping that we can really just do this, have this discussion and link it to debunking other myths that we wanted to look at tonight before we have our closing statements around this myth-busting series, right? There are a number of myths, and I'll come to our question. So there are a number of myths that exist in society because we are identifying that this is a societal problem, right? And like you said, Phumelela, you're not really sure if it is reflective of the state, but our communities, in our communities, we have identified that these kinds of beliefs and the way, that we raise our boy child, which brings me back to that old question that I put across around the role of women, right? But I want to put across these different myths and hear your thoughts on that. There's a myth around raping lesbians, can make them straight, right? There's a myth around, what I mentioned earlier around whether, she's asking for it because of her clothes, right? And another one, which I'm hoping we can tackle and speak a lot more on, is that getting help is expensive for survivors of GBV. And it kind of adds to what Alonda was saying, or it was you actually, Phumelela, that was talking about how expensive, going on trial or the legal system is to victims when they have to, start with, opening a case, and then it goes to court, and it's that whole prosecution that is expensive if you don't have a lawyer. So I wanted to hear your thoughts on those different myths, and then hear from you finally around whether there is hope for the boy child, because where I'm standing right now, I really am worried. I really am worried, but I want to hear your thoughts on, those different myths and those different things that young boys maybe might have, those different conversations that young boys would have, particularly around lesbians, and whether she's asking for it because of her clothes. And I'll put it to you, Phumelela, just to hear your statements on those particular myths.
I'll tell you one thing, and this is probably going to debunk the first two statements you made in terms of lesbians being raped because they're lesbians and because she was asking for it based on what she was wearing. There's one blanket statement: a rapist will rape when a rapist wants to rape. Period. It's clean, blank, period. And that's, I'll say that with my chest, okay? And there's no amount of lesbian, no amount, you could walk naked in the street. If the man you walk past is not a rapist, he will not rape you. It's that simple. It does not go beyond that. It does not go, that's just point blank. And with your last statement in terms of help being expensive, I think our main issue is not really the expensive nature of getting help, but the lack of knowledge.
Yeah.
People don't know where to go. There's a lot of rape crisis centers around hospitals, there's NGOs, there's all those things assisting this government of ours, but people don't know of these things because, as a lot of people firstly don't think this could ever happen to me because I'm at home, I don't go out at night, I don't, all those things. So most people don't know where to go, and they've only been taught of a police station, and that's where it starts and ends, So I think our main goal should be trying to educate people on how to get help, where to get help, also in terms of a rape being something that's happening inside the home. Maybe someone's being raped by a father, a stepfather, an uncle, or whatever. Where do I go besides the police station? Because I mean, if I'm living with this man in the house, I can't go report him for rape and then go back at home and be like, yo, well, I told the police. You know what I mean? So I think we also need to look in terms of ensuring that everyone knows where to go and how to go about things. And in terms of the boy child, I have hope in our generation, personally. I feel like we're raising a different kind of man, and not to take away from what our parents have done already, but I think their scars have become our strength, in the sense that we've seen what their lack of healing has done, and not just the females, but also the men. So even a lot of young men are standing up and are saying, this is not the kind of man I want to raise. This is not the kind of father I want to be. So just besides the government, because all hope is lost there, the onus is on us, man, to just change the narrative and stop focusing on these young girls. Let these girls be girls. Let these girls wear whatever whatever they want to wear, and just normalize. First, I mean, I don't know how this is going to come across, but normalize nudity. Like, let a young girl be able to walk around in a bathing costume at the beach without her feeling some kind of way, teach your 8-year-old boy that it's not okay to feel some kind of way, to feel like you're entitled to that girl's body and you can hit her because boys will be boys, So yeah, I just feel like we must just start there. Start with the little things. The whole boys will be boys. Oh no, he's only hitting you because he likes you, all that nonsense. And I feel like we'll be raising a better generation of men, hopefully. And maybe then, because at the end of the day, these people grow up and be the ones who are making the decisions, and maybe they will be the ones who change legislation, and things will be better for everyone.
Yeah, thank you so much, Phumelela. I think this is, a conversation that we can have all night, because, there's always different themes coming up. Because when you mentioned, basically raising the boy child in a different way, I'm just thinking about our history and where we come from as African people and all of these things. So it's a conversation that can definitely, we can have for a long period of time, and hopefully it leads to some kind of change. Alwande, can we hear from you before we head into our closing?
Of course, yeah. In terms of debunking myths, I 100% echo everything that was said. Myths are myths because they're untrue. It's something that exists that is sort of somewhere in society because it is a story passed down, or because it was a rumor. But it's the one thing that myths have in connection with one another is that they're false, they're untrue. And I think another thing to do is we need to realize whenever we inflict GBV or any other form of harm onto someone, we're stripping that person of their agency and their potential and their capacity to be a fully functional human being who has the right to make their own choices and who has the right to be independent. So when you go out and you rape, that is a decision that you have made to strip someone of their agency and inflict harm. So it's actually not difficult to understand. And I sometimes get frustrated when I get in conversations where we're trying to de-layer it and make it very easy to understand, because it's simple. It's stay in your lane. You do not have a right to interfere in forcefully interfere in someone's life. It's as simple as that. And I think if I can do it, you can do it. But I also obviously think, there's a lot more that comes into socialization. So it's not as simple as just being no, don't do that. In terms of homophobic rape, so raping a lesbian to make her straight, I don't even know where to start with unpacking this, because the power and the narcissism you should have to think that if you rape someone else, you will make that person sort of quote unquote play for your team is crazy. Like it's just completely anti-logic. There are choices, and choices have to be made by all parties who are involved in order to have consensual sex. Yes has to be said by everyone there. So I don't understand how you think you having sex with someone is going to make someone's sexual orientation shift. Like there's a lot of narcissism in there. Secondly, she was asking for it because of her clothes. Clothes don't speak. And I don't know who said this, but someone said this and I was like, yeah, that's a perfect way to put it. We should be able to walk out into the streets fully nude and be safe as we would if we would walk out into the streets fully dressed, or you would think you were safe if you were fully dressed. So yeah, just hope for boy child there is. I think our generation has a privilege that we didn't necessarily have to, fight the atrocities of the past, of the 20th century. But I think if we raise all of our kids in the same way, if we do not gender chores, if we do not gender the way we speak to people, rules and regulations, if we do not gender the type of food we even feed our kids. I mean, that whole thing of, oh no, the dad gets this piece of meat because of that. Like, if we just stop doing all of that, the trickle down effect to that is that kids will learn that, we're actually all equal. The one thing that makes us equal is that we're all human beings. The fact that I am a woman doesn't mean that I can do dishes more. Because I know you know how to wash dishes. You don't want to eat on a dirty plate. So when you have to, you can. So you can, period. I know how to mow a lawn if I want my lawn to look in a certain way. So yeah, there is hope. And I also think our generation has the privilege of, or most of us have the privilege of being socially conscious, and also just speaking up. I think our generation just, we don't mess around. And I think a good example would be, I remember when the Minister of Basic Education said that comment of, because educated men don't rape. And then the way the kids responded, they were like, no, and it's like, yeah, that's the hope of our generation and the next generation, that there is hope for a better future, and just erasing wrongs and rectifying things. So yeah, thanks.
Yeah, well, thank you so much to the both of you, and just capturing what you've just said. I think what we're seeing really is that, like you guys have said, it's at an individual level. It's about making that decision at an individual level and saying that I'm not going to rape, right? We acknowledge that our society wouldn't be the way that it is if we didn't have psychological issues, right? If you feel like you've been traumatized, or there has been something that really pushes you to want to rape, it's important to get help, and that speaks to that third myth, and services such as counseling and advocacy are offered for free and sometimes at a low cost by sexual assault service providers. So you can contact Rape Crisis Center, or you can contact POA. There's a number of different organizations that you can contact that will help you really deal with the issues that you are facing, so that you don't continue perpetuating this kind of violence that we're seeing in society. So I want to thank the both of you. Are there any closing comments before we drop off from the both of you? Any kind of maybe positive messages to a person that might be thinking, I was thinking of going to rape someone. I don't even know if that's how people think, that, but how do you even understand the psychology of somebody, that does that? But any messages that you guys want to send to somebody that is thinking about it, or they have thought about it and they haven't acted yet? Any messages to them before we close? And we'll hear from you, maybe Pumelela. oh, Alanda, did you want to say something? Yeah.
No, I was gonna say, Puns, do you want to go first? That's what I was gonna say.
No, you can go. It's okay.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, just I think, and we spoke about it earlier on, this world doesn't exist for you by yourself. This world, we are a very collective society. No matter where you go, we're equal in our humanity, and we need to operate like that in all levels and at all times. This world belongs to women, it belongs to children, it belongs to gender non-conforming individuals, and it also belongs to other victims and survivors of GBV. So I really don't want to use this phrase, but I'm going to use it again. Just exercise some self-control, and if you can't, get the help that you would need in order to be able to do so, and just be respectful of each other and find the humanity in one another, and yeah, this is something that should be a thing of the past. It's something that shouldn't be happening, and we need to speak about this as if it was happening in past tense, and not, well, as we're sitting down, how many people have, have had GBV inflicted upon them. So yeah, and also I also wanted to say, just please, I urge everyone to believe her, believe the children, believe gender non-conforming individuals. Statistically speaking, there's a 98% chance that they are telling the truth. What are the chances that the person who is coming to you to seek for help is lying? Believe them enough in order to, go through the processes of sifting the truth and sifting dishonesty. But yeah, thank you so much. That's it from me.
Thank you, Alwande. Pumelela?
I'll be brief, and all I say is they need to learn the fact that they're not entitled to women's bodies, they're not entitled to women's respect, they're not entitled to anything. The world doesn't owe them anything, and the sooner they learn that, the better. And I feel that could be a good start point for a lot of the problems that we're facing as a country. The sense of entitlement that men seem to have. I mean, if a woman is sleeping with another woman, why do you feel entitled to say, there's not enough women in the world, and here you are sleeping with each other? Well, how are you going to make babies? All those things, So when we teach, I don't even feel like we need to be teaching them, because honestly, that's being done. But when they learn, when they have conversations amongst themselves, they need to educate each other and unlearn this toxic behavior of feeling entitled to a lot of things. And I think, yeah, if we take it from there, then a lot can be done.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much to the both of you. And I do want to add that, from somebody, maybe if somebody's watching at home and they're thinking, oh my gosh, they're bashing men again, this is not that. Because I do know that a lot of people, they're tired of but this is not that. We are not bashing men. We understand that it's not all men, but those that do perpetrate, we are talking to those guys. And we're also talking to you as their friends, to hold your friends accountable. We understand that, we all play a role in society, and we all are responsible for our own healing. We're not, we might have had things happen to us, or maybe things that continue to happen to us that traumatize us and basically, push us to making the decisions that we're making around perpetrating or perpetuating GBV. We understand that, but as an adult or even as a child, because you find, brothers doing weird things to their sisters. But as a person, you're responsible for your own healing, right? If you don't know where to go, reach out for help from a person that you trust, and ask them, what do you do in such a situation, so that you get that help, so that, the cycle of violence we're able to end it in our generation, and we're able to see those young people in the next generation that they're in a better position, and we're not afraid to basically walk around naked because we're thinking, oh my gosh, what is my neighbor going to think, So I want to thank both our panelists, Phumelela Qatela and Alwande Khumalo, for joining us. I think this has been a very important conversation, even if I have to say so myself. I really appreciate your participation. I do want to say to the audience that the GBV Interrupted campaign is still ongoing. You will have seen, if you do follow us on all social media platforms, that from January until now, actually, we've been focusing on interrupting GBV in all of our spaces. So we encourage you to take the pledge on our website at amnesty.org.za and basically become an agent of change in your community, you know, and become that face of change in your circles, basically, because it's not something that we can do as, basically only by ourselves. We need our communities to change their behaviors if we're going to see this change that we're so desperately looking for. So I wanted to thank you for joining this conversation, and thank you to Constitution Hill for hosting us and basically helping us sum up this series that has been really amazing with amazing panelists. And we look forward to engaging again. If you want to engage with us, like I said, go on our social media platforms and go onto our website, and we'll be happy to be in touch with you around how you can get involved with the Interrupt GBV campaign or other campaigns that Amnesty South Africa is working on. So thank you and have a good night.
Thank you. Thanks, Amnesty. Thanks, Conhill. Thanks, Booms.
Thank you.